India has no issues with Bangladesh first.
How India engages or manages its neighborhood relationships.
That is, ups and downs happen between every two democratic countries.
Bangladesh-India relationship, the trade is astronomically low.
I think Tariq Rahman is the perfect guy for the job.
Now, this is where exactly China fits in.
The BSF is a chronically corrupt body.
The whole concept of Hindu-Muslim once again comes back.
Totally foolish. Totally foolish.
Does Delhi has concern about it, or it complements Delhi's strategic interests?
Government to government communications has to be crystal clear.
Good day, audience. Welcome to Alap's Power Play. My name is Shahabnam Khan. I teach international relations. I'll be your host today. This is a series of what we call understanding geopolitics, Bangladesh's national interest, international relations altogether, and where we will be discussing a wide range of issues, whether it is from bilateral or multilateral prisms. Today, as we speak, in our strategic studies culture, people are generally very reserved, very conservative. And in most cases, they're very careful. Now, my guest today is not one of them. My guest is a very different breed altogether. Abhijit Iyer-Mitra is a fascinating defense conversationalist. He's a defense economist, which itself is a rare breed when it comes to strategic understanding of the global issues in terms of defense, security, and God knows what. At the same time, Abhijit is a scholar who was trained in Monash University. He received a degree in international relations. He served for a very eminent think tank called Observer Research Foundation. He's now working as a senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies in Delhi. Where his focus is nuclear thresholds, nuclear conversation, nuclear doctrines, and that really makes him a very special kind of expert in international relations. He has served at the Sandia National Laboratories in Albuquerque, which is one of the premier research institutions in nuclear studies. He was a fellow at the Stimson Center based in Washington, D.C., which is a very respectable American think tank. And he has contributed to Carnegie through his intellectual inputs in the forms of monograph and articles. He has written extensively for the First Post, the Print, Swarajya, and many other international and national news outlets. And he's a very familiar face in Indian television framework. And then what makes it even more dangerous is that he's not only an intellectually sound academic and researcher, he's also a very humorous, witty person. And these two are a deadly, what I call lethal combination, because he would deliver the sharp analysis, but with a sense of what we call relaxed mind. Which means, as your host, I know exactly how sharp Abhijit is, that he won't let me go away, that's for sure, with anything. And this conversation is going to be genuinely unpredictable in the best possible way. Ladies and gentlemen, Abhijit Iyer-Mitra.
Thank you so much, Shahab Bhai, for that very extensive intro.
Well, you come with a brilliant career that people would always appreciate, and that makes you one of the finest researcher in this issue. Now, before we start the question and answer, let me set a little bit of what we are going to discuss about. You see, over the decade and a half, Dhaka and Delhi operated on what critics called a one-party partnership. So that criticism is very much there, where India's Bangladesh policy was essentially on one party specific. And Dhaka, after the election in February, Bangladesh voted. BNP has won. Jamaat has come to the opposition in the parliament. And Dhaka is no longer in the mood to be anybody's strategic backyard. The question then for us, not only for Bangladesh, but for India and rest of the world, when you get to see Iran, Ukraine, every sort of perils are there. Today is deceptively simple, but geopolitically explosive. Is what we are witnessing, is it a reset or a mature recalibration between two sovereign neighbors? Now, that means I might tell you that the current government has a policy called Bangladesh First policy, or you may perhaps interpret it as a doctrine. With that kind of background, my first question to you, Abhijit, India's Bangladesh policy under the Modi government was arguably built with one very reliable partner at the center in the past, which made Delhi to get stability, transit corridors, and a partner who kept the security situation much more manageable. But when that arrangement ended in 2024 August, Delhi found itself without many institutional alternatives in Dhaka. Looking back, if you look back, was that a reasonable strategic bet that just didn't age well? Or does it point to a broader pattern in how India engages or manages its neighborhood relationships?
So, Shahabhai, I think, India's been able to maneuver uh, even the opposition in our neighborhood very well. So, if you remember in the Maldives, the current president came on an anti India platform and he's become very pro India. When the communist president of Sri Lanka got elected, everybody was like, oh, we've permanently lost Sri Lanka to China. And today, Sri Lanka is a very, very dear friend of ours. Again, I need to remind our viewers that, prior to this, it's seen as a one party policy only because Sheikh Hasina was ruling for something like 15 years. And Modi has ruled for about 11 years. So it was the only prime minister he had ever dealt with. However, we also need to remember that there was a very robust engagement with Khalida Zia's government when she was in power. Now, were there problems? Of course there were. But that is ups and downs happen in every between every two democratic countries. I would consider what happened from 24 till the election of Tariq Rahman now to be the aberration, and I'll tell you why. You see, that was not a democratically accountable government. India has no issues with Bangladesh first. Tell me in one instance where Sheikh Hasina was not Bangladesh first, where she gave up any crucial Bangladeshi interest for Indian interests. Controlling cross border security. How is it not in Bangladeshi interest? Because we all know illegality is fungible. What is illegality on the Indian side of the border will invariably translate into illegality on the Indian side of the border. So, for example, it is the beef smuggling, the cow smuggling networks which become beef in Bangladesh, which invariably do a lot of drug trade and guns in India. So controlling them is in India's interests, and it is in Bangladesh's interests if we manage to establish some form of formal beef trade, which is, it's politically not going to happen in India. So I don't think any of them, Khalida Zia or Sheikh Hasina, ever compromised on Bangladesh first. The issue was Muhammad Yunus and the unelected people he had around him. See, they were not worried about elections at all. They had no constituency to respond to. They were all unelectable, sorry to use the word, but unelectable jokers with, the white man's stamp of approval. And we know the kind of stamps of approval the white man gives. Malala Yousafzai, for example, Arundhati Roy, for example. Getting Arundhati Roy to talk on India is like me getting some famous chef in America, Julia Child or something like that, to talk on American social policy or American diplomacy. Not going to happen. And yet, that's what happens. So, this man, he had a sort of stamp of approval which meant he became an overall expert on everything, zero accountability, absolutely rapacious and venal, trying so hard to postpone the elections. And ultimately, it was the last institutional friend that India had, which was the Bangladesh army, which actually came and stamped its foot, put its foot down and said, "Boss, you're going to hold elections, full stop." And that was a very, very good thing, because that is exactly what we expect. We expect institution to institution contact. And as I can see it, Tariq Rahman is doing a fabulous job. He's got all the ideas of Bangladesh first without a lot of the baggage his mother carried. And I completely understand the late Khaleda Zia's baggage towards India. Uh, Emotions are a part of diplomacy. There's nothing you can do about it. The question is, how do mature people navigate around it? I
Perfect.
think as long as there are the checks and balances of democracy, Bangladesh first is completely compatible with India first. And I think this is the beginning of a beautiful, renewed friendship.
Okay, perfect. I think you have raised several issues. I mean, we can always have a conversation on the issues related to the baggage, for an example. I mean, now that we have a new government, I'm not going to look back, but most certainly when you looked into Dr. Yunus, I think one important issue that we often forget that he was mandated by the public too. Now, going back to the second question that I have in my mind, I mean, because you have rightly said that it is probably going to be a reset. And then the Bangladesh First doctrine of the current government is very much based on two principles. One is, of course, nationalism, and the second one is obviously realism. Now, BNP has been fairly explicit about a Bangladesh First foreign policy. And they have articulated it very clearly by saying this is a sovereignty forward. There's a red line about the sovereignty conversation. It is interest driven, which I call the transactional relationship. And of course, it's going to be genuinely, as much possible, non-aligned in practice. Now, what does it mean? It means that this government is going to have much more of an assertive foreign policy, which is required to maneuver, as you have rightly mentioned, through the very world order which is declining, and you get to see that international liberal order that we used to believe in is almost over. Now, in that case, from Delhi's perspective, I mean, Delhi has definitely its own perspective. Is that a concern that the Bangladesh First, when it actually has become much more robust, not thinking about what would be India's interest or China's interest or Americans' interest, rather what the public really wants and has to be delivered. Now, that is actually, whether it is actually a predictable or workable arrangement that you think, or because one could always argue that, at least I argue theoretically, that transactional partner is easier to deal with than an emotionally dependent one. You have mentioned about emotion, but I mean, a Machiavellian realist like me would always say, well, emotion is very good behind the door. I mean, let's talk about the things happening outside of the door. Now, does Bangladesh First actually offer India a more stable foundation than what it used to be over the past 1.5 decade?
100%. And I'll
Perfect.
tell you,
Hmm.
look, if, say, for example, Shahab Bhai and Abhijit are having disagreements, uh,
Which we always do.
which we always do, and you are holding back. You're not telling me the whole story. You're not telling me what your interests are. So, for example, if you come over to my place, what you really want is, Tamil Nadu style mutton curry and Kashmiri style Rogan Josh, etc., etc. And instead, I give you a vegetarian meal. You grumble about it. You hold it as a, you hold it against me, but keep it private. That doesn't work. We'll never be able to solve that problem. But as a Shahab first policy, if you say, Obhijit, I want my Kashmiri mutton Rogan Josh and I want the Chettinad mutton fry, we're very happy. It's a win-win situation. I keep you happy. I get to show off my cooking skills, etc., etc. When a interest is clearly articulated and followed through, without hiding anything back. Clarity does amazing things for foreign policy. One of the reasons China has bad relations with almost everybody around it, even the people it has good relations with, are deeply suspicious of China, is because they talk in such jargon and mumbo jumbo. Nobody can get through to them or actually find out what they're trying to say. And when you then have interpreters of that policy, you come and say, well, we thought it was very clear. Well, no, it was really not very clear at all. So, with Tariq Rahman and the Bangladesh policy, if it's very clearly enunciated, is uh, regional stability in Bangladesh's interest? Yes. Is nuclear energy in Bangladesh's interest? Yes. Is development of the offshore gas fields in Bangladesh's interest? Yes. Is the industrialization of Bangladesh and the growth of the Bangladeshi human development indices and per capita income a fantastic thing? Yes. Is there anything India disagrees with on this? Because our whole point is that the more and more Bangladesh's industry grows, and the more prosperous that Bangladesh becomes, the more it will see the need to integrate into India's northeast, and the more and more the reason for, some kind of an open borders agreement sort of thing ultimately, when, if and when the political will for that happens.
So is
So I
it,
don't see this as a bad thing at all. This is the best thing that could have happened to uh, uh, Bangladesh-India relations.
by the way, Avijit is an outstanding chef, and he cooks mutton like anything. Okay, now you have brought two, three things really on the table. The first one is the China variable. I mean, uh, that is where a lot of hiccups we get to hear. I mean, at least I get to hear whenever I'm meeting friends in Delhi or Washington or perhaps even in London. But at the same time, if you look at Bangladesh-India relationship, the trade is astronomically low. I mean, if you look at that, it's a 1.4 billion population market versus 180 million population, and then of course this illegal immigration constantly hammers. I mean, the market is not in the play. I mean, I think this is where the fundamental argument comes in. Now, this is where exactly China fits in. Now, let me ask you this question. Even if you look at this Chinese investment in Bangladesh, right? Even they came forward when Padma Bridge by the previous government was initiated, the Chinese walked in. The World Bank walked away. Then you have seen that they have expressed their willingness to fund and support the Tista project, which is very much within the people's heart, because this is like Farakka resulted in a massive change in livelihoods. So is Tista going to do? And then, of course, China remains as the largest trading partner. I mean, despite Bangladesh being surrounded by India on the three sides, and then we have a little bit with Myanmar. And now with BNP in power, does Delhi genuinely have a window to recalibrate the geo-economic, particularly when it comes to supply chain, particularly now, that weaponization of supply chain is very much there. And geo-economic balance, can they? Or has China's structural entrenchment in Bangladesh become somewhat government proof? I mean, I use this government proof term quite often. At this point, I mean, when we are in the process of reset and recalibration and reform, what do you think?
I don't, I don't think any Chinese intrusion anywhere is government proof. Ultimately, we've seen the Chinese tend, in some cases, to overplay their hand, and it ricochets back on them. But I would suggest that the reason that Bangladesh's trade with China is much higher than its trade with India has to do with the nature of markets and industrialization both
Exactly.
in India and Bangladesh. India simply does not produce what Bangladesh needs at the cost point that Bangladesh needs. So, Indian production and industry are very inefficient thanks to our own government policy. Uh, uh, we're back to Indira Gandhi's regulation Raj and Babu Raj, where the upper bureaucracy lives off the state, the lower bureaucracy lives off the people. You know this because Bangladesh, I presume, would have had the same as long as the British and the Pakistanis were in control. Now, what happens is there are things that both Indians need and Bangladeshis need, which are exactly the same thing. Cheap mobile phones, cheap electronics, cheap TVs. These are absolutely crucial additions to our value of life, the quality of life, which we seek in large numbers from the Chinese. And that is why China is the world supplier. I think they're everybody's biggest trading partner. Not that they're also India's, I think, biggest or second biggest trading partner after America. Now, there is nothing alarming about this. The only thing that alarms us is when China offers interest free infrastructure, which then ends up becoming a debt trap. Again, it is only our duty to warn, it is not our duty to prevent. So, for example, when they went into Hambantota in Sri Lanka, we told the government, listen, have you done the cost benefit analysis of this? This is not an economically viable project. And sure enough, after so many years, it remains a completely economically sterile project that has not yielded any form of dividends at all. Same with Gwadar port in Pakistan. Same with the Pakistan-China economic corridor. Our only duty in this is to, uh, alert Bangladeshi authorities as to have they done their cost benefit correctly. It is not to stall, prevent, discourage Bangladesh, and you will see that is not happening. Even the Tista project, we will grumble about it. Are we going to do anything to stop it? Absolutely not. This is, I think, this is, where Indian foreign policy has reached a certain maturity, where we don't feel the need to go on squabbling with our neighbors on everything under the sun. It was essential, when India was on the verge of hunger and beggary in the 60s, 70s, 80s. This was one of the ways we could show our strength by bullying our neighbors. India is not that country anymore. We don't go around bullying our neighbors, be it Nepal, be it Maldives. Ultimately, with Maldives, what happened? Did we ever bully them since the 1980s? No. Sri Lanka, have we bullied them since the 1980s? No. Bangladesh, well, the Bangladeshis believe, Sheikh Hasina was a deep Indian plant or whatever, but she was very pro Bangladesh. She didn't give us a lot of what we wanted. So I think this is the nature of trade. I think ultimately we have to assume that, and this is a good thing that has happened in Indian foreign policy, is that we know that Bangladesh today is mature enough to deal with its own foreign policy, it has the agency to make its own cost benefit calculations, which is why when the India Bhutan agreement, which was kind of a neo-colonial agreement, Bhutan can't have relations with third countries without India's permission and things like that, we have not renewed that. We have dropped all those clauses, and it's now a normal treaty between two friendly countries. That's about it. Uh, we have achieved the same thing with, and look, Bhutan, there was no pushback against India at all. So you will see this as a maturing of Indian foreign policy. And I, I think I think Tariq Rahman is the perfect guy for the job. He has let go of his mother's emotional baggage. He has let go of, he's been cathartic for Bangladesh in that it is not Sheikh Hasina's government. And he's been cathartic for the India relationship in that he's actually an elected head of state and not some, self perpetuating tin pot who had uh, uh, great megalomaniacal fantasies of greatness.
But here, I mean, I must add, because whenever it comes to the current regime, and I get to see that when you look into Tariq Rahman's mother, our former Prime Minister, Khalda Zia, I think she also pursued a very strong Bangladesh first. I mean, we may contest the issue that whether some policies were right or wrong. And in fact, even if you look at General Zia, who was between 1975 onward and current prime minister's father, also had a very, very strong nationalist prism. I mean, that is the reason the main appeal for them to get more than 200 seats in the parliament is the narratives of nationalism that came back. I mean, and that Bangladesh First really appeals, has the appeal that what Bangladeshi population continues to see, wants to see. Now, that brings us to a very important issue. As you have rightly mentioned about market, at the end of the day, when market functions, everything functions properly. Now, the problem is the non-tariff barriers that we have between these two countries. I mean, I have mentioned that the transit issue. I mean, even if you come to Dhaka, you get to see the analysis that whether the transit fees and others were actually done in a proper manner or not. And perhaps the water continues to be a major bone of contention between these two countries. Now, the issue of the West Bengal comes in too. You know, the West Bengal election is often seen as one of the barriers between the relationship between Bangladesh and India. Now, here my question to you is, when we look into that, is the illegal immigration still a major concern for Delhi, or is it a West Bengal specific problem? And the second issue, when it comes to BSF's record at the Bangladesh border, has consistently been a friction point, and BNP government has historically been more vocal. I mean, if you go back to the statement, more vocal than what you would have heard from the Awami League administrations. As someone who thinks carefully about India's defense architecture, such as you, is there a case to be made that the current border management posture or West Bengal prism of Bangladesh's relationship with Delhi, or whatever its tactical logic, is generating strategic costs in terms of what we call Bangladeshi public perception about India?
So, you know, one thing about the Bangladeshi perception of India is I have never heard a tangible argument of why India and Bangladesh should be in competition with each other as opposed to be, corollary to each other.
I mean, I don't get to
I-
hear competition narratives either. I mean, to be very
yeah,
frank with you,
exactly.
we
So
don't
I
have that competition thing.
exactly.
Right,
So I don't know where that comes from. Now, the
right.
two issues you raised. First is we need to remember that both of us are third world countries with chronic, endemic corruption. And that corruption isn't going anywhere till you develop out of it. It's a chicken and egg thing. Till you develop, you can't deal with corruption. But till you deal with corruption, you can't really develop, sort of thing. And the BSF is a chronically corrupt body. Our mutual friend Joita Bhattacharya, she did the
Yes,
whole
yes,
paper
yes.
on the late Joita Bhattacharya who died during COVID. Brilliant young researcher. She did this paper on cattle smuggling, and she was, you know, basically hinting. She couldn't write it down, but she told me in private, of course, and I think she told you in private also,
Yep.
how how completely complicit the BSF was with the cattle smuggling lobby in pushing that cattle across the border to Bangladesh. Right. Now, what do you do in those cases? This is not a problem of, just Bangladeshis coming. It is a problem also of the BSF not doing their jobs. Now, is it a problem? I would say more than West Bengal. The actual Bangladeshi problem per se is one of Assam, where about 19 districts have seen a unnatural increase in population, where local Muslims are complaining that Bengali speaking Muslims have come there. Now, in India, you have to understand states were divided on a linguistic basis. So, language based nationalism is a very, very important thing for each state. And given you have a history of Bengali, not Bangladeshi, Bengali versus Assamese friction, this becomes one more added friction point which politicians are going to utilize for their own goods. I mean, let's face it realistically. In two third world countries, if we think politicians are not going to come back to, identity politics, even in first world countries, they come back to identity politics. In third world countries, they tend to be much more um blatant. Now, what is the solution to this? Growth, 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 industrialization, improvement in the quality of life so that you eliminate the need for any kind of population movement and a migration. That is one thing nobody is really talking about as a solution at all, right? Why is it we're perfectly happy having lots of Nepalese? We have one of the most liberal regimes anywhere in the world with Nepal. A Nepalese citizen can go right up to joint secretary in the government of India.
Hmm.
Nobody cares about Nepalese people voting in Indian elections. You can get Aadhaar cards, you can get Indian bank accounts, complete free movement between the two countries and things like that. The only restriction is if a Nepalese goes to a third country from India or an Indian goes to a third country from Nepal, they need a letter from the local embassy saying that this is permitted. Other than that, it's all legit. It's all kosher, well, halal in this case, I guess. Um, these are all solvable issues. The problem is we're not looking at it through the prism we need to, which is it's fundamentally resource competition playing out. You need growth and you need a complementarity of economies in order to spur that growth.
No, I agree. I agree with you. But the only problem is when you bring Nepal in, I think Bangladesh is slightly different than what you would imagine in the case of Nepal, because here is a major problem. And you have rightly mentioned about the identity politics. And I think here the whole concept of Hindu Muslim once again comes back. And that is not today. I mean, that is since 1947. And I think that kind of genesis still persists when it comes to bureaucratic mindset and when you go to Delhi or perhaps many other places. Uh, this is fundamentally a problem when it comes to perception too. Now, that brings me to an important question. Which is a media narrative problem. And you and I both are quite familiar with the media commentary. I mean, I'm not saying that the media essentially reflects India, but it essentially creates perception among the public. Now, look at in the case of Bangladeshi or perhaps in some Indian voices, we have seen that certain media narratives around Bangladesh have perhaps outpaced the actual ground reality. I mean, even if you look at the issue of minority situation, I mean, I would always argue that if you look at the US human rights reports on India, religious freedom reports on India, or perhaps when Bangladeshi minority issues were talked about at like in a cacophonic manner, or perhaps I often make this joke that high decibel verbatim terrorism to a great extent. Now, what happens is you get to see that the framing of BNP, or perhaps in that matter, the immediate past UNIS government, and in many cases, Jamaat-e-Islami. And you have to understand that Jamaat-e-Islami has already got almost 32% popular vote. So, which means the people has the appetite for all these political parties in different forms. Now, as someone who is both a media commentator and a strategic thinker, that is you, how do you separate the signal from the noise that you get to hear from the media? And does Delhi's strategic community, international relations community, foreign policy community, in that matter, the civil society, or perhaps those who are very much far rightist within Delhi political spectrum, share the same picture that's being painted in the primetime news, or perhaps all the cacophonies that you get to hear?
So remember, because I talk directly to my government and I try through you and others to talk directly to the Bangladeshi government, I never fall for media narratives, because remember, the media has to sell a narrative. That is how they, uh, uh, they're for profit organizations, they're not NGOs. They're meant to make a profit, and we unfortunately live in an age where it is not perspicacity but shrillness that makes profit. You may get one side of the view of the narrative from Times Now and Republic, and you get another side of the narrative from, say, Wire and Scroll in India. But they're both equally, corrupted in the sense that they are two complete polar opposites of each other, and they're actually mirror images of each other in that sense almost. um, Not entirely, but very similarly. Now, when it comes to foreign narratives, the New York Times, Washington Post, I never take them seriously on anything because wherever I have been as an adult, I've realized that they are clueless. They know nothing about anything. Uh, all their narratives on Iran. I've been about 7 times to Iran, and I have, sorry to use the word, but I've never come across more bullshit about Iran than what I've read in the New York Times and Washington Post. It is the same with Assad in Syria. I have not been to the new Syria. It has been the same with the Afghan Taliban, who are my very good friends. I've, gone and smoked hashish with them. Spent a whole month with them, doing lots of things, not just smoking hashish. Also that. North Korea. North Korea was nothing of what was described in these two newspapers of Record and The Guardian and things like that. So I never take any media seriously, no matter, imagine the arrogance to believe that a white guy on a 3 year or 4 year rotation comes to your country and understands your country more than anybody else does. Please, give me a break. Give me a break. Not happening. I am 48 years old and I'm still discovering things about my country that would make my assessment from, say, 3 years back feel totally foolish. Totally foolish. And I think all our countries are like that. Countries are very complex organisms which simply can't be summed up in a 700 to 1000 word op ed. And yet, that is what these newspapers try to do, or TV channels try to do. So I never take them seriously. Now, the general public, what do we do about that? This is where I think government communications are super important. Governments do not come out and communicate. I can tell you this government in particular, the BJP, is atrocious with communication. The only reason they keep winning elections is that you have somebody like Rahul Gandhi in the opposition. I honestly tell you, I think Rahul Gandhi is more responsible for the BJP getting a majority than Mr. Narendra Modi or Amit Shah is. Out of the 240 seats now, the 303 before that, and the 282 before that, I am telling you at least 100 seats are directly Rahul Gandhi's personal contribution to the BJP. Uh, there's nothing we can do about this. As for narratives, when you don't have good communication, when you don't have deep sociological communicators, how are you going to overcome that? I would put to you that all this, decreasing media freedom, increase in Hindu Muslim rights, just go through the National Crime Bureau statistics. Hindu Muslim incidents have come down massively. Okay. There is actual statistical. Then they'll say, oh, well, the statistics is bad. But tell me something. You were saying the statistics was very good before Modi came, and the same statistical organization with the same methodology suddenly became bad after Modi came. You have to learn to call out BS when you hear BS.
No, I agree. I mean, I have done a little research on how religion influences Indian foreign policy. And I agree with you on this particular point. I mean, I took the Congress regime, the post Congress regimes, and then perhaps the current regime. And I came to a conclusion that, I mean, at the end of the day, the religiosity continues to be a prime feature, this way or the other. It's pretty much like Democrats and the Republicans. I mean, one would directly go and bomb, the other one may say, hey, we do it in a nicer way. So I think these sort of issues I find pretty much there. And I think, as you have rightly mentioned, the sociological connection has largely become a major problem. The reason is these are lost in political translation of the realities. And that brings me to one concern that you have really pointed out, whether it is Washington Post or New York Times, and perhaps even if you look at the Global Press Freedom Index, we all together are actually going down. I mean, even I remember that my parents used to read Hindustan Times, Times of India back in time, but now again, they're very concerned that whether they should read it or not. Now, that brings us to one important factor, the Washington factor. I mean, I think Washington's re-engagement and the Bay of Bengal triangle that you get to see. See, the US has re-engaged with Dhaka, I mean, fairly visibly during the interim government's time, and that they give signals that the relationship is warmer, and Bangladesh sits in a part of the world Washington cares about increasingly. They had a little bit of disengagement. Of course, Biden had the Burma Act for Myanmar stabilization, but again, Trump has a very different kind of transactionality to warm up. The Bay of Bengal has also seen a genuinely contested strategic geography, as you'd agree to that. Now, the question is, how do you see, or how does Delhi read American re-engagement with Bangladesh under and the post-Yunus government, and whether it is a complementary to Indian interests or as something that complicates the neighborhood in ways that aren't always acknowledged publicly? I mean, at least there were narratives that, look, what is happening in the Middle East, what is happening in Afghanistan, now these kind of warming up. Does Delhi has concern about it, or it complements Delhi's strategic interests?
Right. So, this is where I need to separate reality from media narrative, which then ultimately becomes conspiracy theory.
Correct.
Delhi, at least for the last 30 years or more, has been very comfortable with all its neighbors engaging China, America, whatever. We have always been perfectly fine. Uh, and I'm telling you this that this is an institutional belief. We have, in fact, been encouraging the Bhutanese to have a Chinese embassy opened in Bhutan. The issue has been Bhutan has its own issues, that it's seen the Indian example where India recognized China without first solving the border dispute as Sardar Patel wanted. And that led to a whole string of unfortunate events. So Bhutan now wants to sort out its border with China before before they officially recognize China. That is their problem. That is not our problem. We have always, not always, but at least for the last 30 years, uh, been over and above it. The issue becomes what happens when journalists who live in their own bubble, who believe in their own power to shape governments, who believe in their own power to shape policy, and people like these jobless ex bureaucrats that become, uh, for want of publicity or whatever, go and start churning the waters, muddying the waters, really. What do you do at that point? And this is where I would say government to government communications has to be crystal clear, and it has to be uh, popularity proof. I say popularity proof because we need to remember both India and Bangladesh are republics. We are not democracies. Democracy is where a vote is. Only Switzerland is a real democracy because people have the right to call a referendum on absolutely every government decision. Here, precisely understanding that it is that kind of government that leads to Socrates being forced by the Athenian agora to drink hemlock,
Hmm.
that you do not allow that kind of capriciousness, and you have a republic which keeps getting elected every 5 years, and they can temper down the uh, 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 volatility of public opinion. Now, the very fact that the head of Bangladeshi intelligence was in Delhi last week, or earlier this week, I forget when, is very clear that we're starting up the direct head of state to head of state, institution to institution talks. That is a very, very, very good sign. We're both mature countries. There are going to be disagreements. The thing is, how do you deal with those disagreements? Between friends, disagreements don't see the light of day. They are dealt with, and finally, some, spin doctored narrative is then put out into the public, and then the narrative spinners spin it their own way.
No, I agree. I mean, if that is the case, I mean, that brings me the elephant here is the because I take it from you that the relationship with the United States and China, everything, and you have cited the case of Bhutan. And here comes the white elephant, I mean, for Delhi. in a sense. Like now you get to see Dhaka Islamabad normalization. And that normalization, for us, it is for sure pragmatism. But sometimes, whenever I go to Delhi, it is all about red flags. Now, here's something that I wanted to ask you, because now, if you look at Dhaka Islamabad discussions, are very much within trade conversations, diplomatic courtesies, and there is always some sort of noticeable shift in Dhaka's tone towards Islamabad compared to what you have seen in the Hasina years, right? Now, from a pure realist standpoint, I mean, I'm bringing a little bit of cynical realism over here to listen to you. Is this Bangladesh simply expanding its strategic portfolio that you think, or perhaps does a Dhaka Islamabad normalization, even a modest one, alter the security calculus in ways Delhi should be genuinely concerned about? Or perhaps is this going to create a new strategic calculus for Delhi when it comes to Dhaka, Beijing, Islamabad relationship?
Right. So, one thing we deal with in Delhi, or rather the public commentariat, is the knowledge of Bangladesh is abysmal.
I
Like
agree.
it is, in India, all research funds are spent on events, nothing is actually spent on research. If people say they've been to countries, it's usually been traveling business class to five-star hotel lobby to five-star hotel lobby. Have you been to Russia? Oh, yeah. I went in Aeroflot business class to the Kempinski Hotel in the Kremlin. I walked around the Kremlin and I came back, and that is the extent of my Russia experience, right? This is the kind of experience you have. It is all events. There is no actual primary research done. So, tell me if I'm getting it wrong because I want to test myself live here. Bangladesh, Pakistan was formed on the basis Islam above everything else. Bangladesh said, yes, Islam is important, but Bengali, the language and Bengali culture is equally important. Now, the way the BNP and Awami League are, I would say Awami League is Bengali most important. Uh, BNP would be Bengali more important than Islam, especially when it comes to Urdu imposition and things, say here. Jamaat-e Islami would be here, right, which is Islam above all. Now, that is an identity argument we don't understand and we can't deal with. I think when the Jamaat comes, we will have a different set of problems. The BNP per se is not a problem because it is fundamentally a nationalist government. Now, we talked about Khalida Zia's baggage, and to put it out in the open, she believed that India was responsible for killing her husband. Uh, That said, Sheikh Hasina had her own baggage because she believed many elements of the Pakistan, residual elements of the Pakistan military, etc., were responsible for killing her family. Uh, that it was somehow, engineered out there. So I think the divorce of Bangladesh from Pakistan diplomatically was also laden by the same baggage in a way that Khalida Zia's relationship with India was laden. India does not have a problem with Bangladesh, making up with Pakistan and having a good relation with Pakistan. The important thing is you shouldn't have Pakistanis coming to Bangladesh and Bangladesh allowing itself to be used adversely to affect India's security, which is the stated objective of Pakistan very, very openly, and I'm not going by press narratives. I'm going by speeches of military officers who come in, there are lots of videos on YouTube saying, we'll open a second front in Bangladesh. So this isn't a press narrative. We all know the army runs Pakistan. And when they say something, they're very serious about it. I think the issue therefore becomes how much has Bangladesh thought it through and how much. So it does become zero, I won't say zero sum, but it becomes India and Bangladesh can do win win without harming a third party. But Pakistan's definition of a win win of Pakistan Bangladesh relations is essentially harming a third party. So then, how does Bangladesh carry out win-win with Pakistan?
No, I think Bangladesh as a sovereign state understands the limit of all the relationship, whether it is with Islamabad or Beijing. I mean, I'm going back to your reference of debt. I mean, if you are citing Sri Lankan and other cases, if you look that Bangladesh's debt with China is absolutely reasonable. I mean, it's below 7%. I mean, average, global average, it's 3 to 4% lower than the global average. Rather, we have the multilaterals coming in as the debt provider. Now, I think I'm quite sure. I mean, here when the issue about Islamabad comes in, I mean, Bangladesh will pursue a very robust relationship with Islamabad. So with Delhi, and again, if we are talking to Islamabad, we get the same narratives that you are giving us. So therefore, we are always caught in between the exchange of narratives fire. So that is why I think Bangladesh remains very pragmatic when it comes to relationship. And this is where another problem pops in. And I think the Indian relationship with Israel, India's relationship with Iran, Pakistan's relationship with Saudi Arabia having defense pact, all together really creates another kind of pressure on Bangladesh as well as on India, without any doubt. I mean, even if you look at the trade deals with Washington and then Delhi's relationship with Moscow or perhaps Tehran, everything comes under some sort of, scrutiny in not only in Washington but overall the West. Now, here is the question that I always really am concerned about. I mean, the way that the West Asia is now changing. I mean, look at the escalation, the ripple over effect of this escalation has impact on South Asia too. Now, both in terms of economics, I mean, we both the countries have serious remittance economy linked with the Middle East. We have energy economy to be linked with the Middle East, and that has a serious problem on our domestic political issue. And even if you look at the BNP government, is very new. It has just come to power over the past 2 weeks only, right? I mean, at such a time, how do you think that this particular Iran, US, Israel will actually influence South Asian geopolitics?
Look, Israel's ability to influence South Asian geopolitics is zero. Having dealt with the Israelis for a very long time, uh, they're about as clueless about India as the New York Times and Washington Post is, even about Pakistan that way. The extent of their depth and intelligence spreads to political maneuvering in America, Canada, and Europe. A large part of the Maghreb, which is to say North Africa, and the Middle East up to Iran and south up to Yemen. And there's a reason for it. That is where the biggest Jewish diaspora lived or continue to live, and that is where they all came back from. So they brought in native knowledge, and they can intelligence penetrate in that they can, they will remember, the Iranian Jews will remember Farsi, go back and they can blend back into society, stay undercover, and things like that. With Pakistan, India, we had minuscule Jewish populations. Their understanding of India is very rudimentary. Further east to the biggest Muslim countries, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, non existent knowledge, totally non existent. So, Israel, the way Israel influences by is by imposing its security prerogatives onto America. Now, we can have a long conversation if is Israel actually imposing those security priorities on America, or is it following America? Because there are a lot of indications that this is very much a Trump driven campaign, not an Israeli driven campaign. And it has a lot to do with the previous unviability of Venezuelan oil, which has suddenly become very lucrative now in spite of the added refining costs and the added transportation cost. That said, what is America doing today that Obama did not do, that Clinton did not do, that George Bush did not do, that Biden did not do. They've all done this regime change, going out and, bombing freedom and democracy down everybody's throats who did not ask for it. They went and made a right royal mess of Iraq. They went and made a right royal mess of Afghanistan. They went and made a right royal mess of Syria. They went and made a right royal mess of Libya. And yet, and yet, they're now doing that with Iran. They've learned absolutely nothing from their previous mistakes. My personal opinion is when a country decides to go into a suicidal spiral, double down on its mistakes, and essentially destroy its own empire, you should let it do that because it is not our job to save somebody suicidal for themselves. Does it impact their policy with regards to South Asia, though? I don't see any kind of regime change being enacted by them or overt political interference by them uh, in the near future. I think the last time we came close to it was was when Cyclone Nargis hit Myanmar. And India went out of its way to protect Myanmar from any kind of foreign intervention because they were furious. The British and French stationed two aircraft carriers. I think one was a helicopter carrier and the other was an aircraft carrier of the Myanmar coast, threatening intervention if they didn't accept humanitarian aid. And what India did was it provided lots of helicopters and lots of aid, which Myanmar was politically comfortable accepting. Uh, and that, in many ways, parried what the French and British were trying to do. We said, well, you deliver it to us, we'll deliver it to the Myanmarese. And that's exactly what happened.
Perfect.
I think, in many ways, despite the competition that may exist, I think that level of protecting our neighbors as best as we can within our limited resources from foreign interference also exists in Indian policy. Now, is that a bad thing? Is it a patronizing big brotherly thing? Maybe. But I don't think it's going to go as far as it did during Cyclone Nargis, because remember, that was the peak of that absolutely stupid R2P, responsibility to protect, doctrine that they floated to violate international law.
Thank you, Abhijit. That was a fascinating discussion because we have understood and you have understood our views too. And I think one important, before we conclude this session, let me end with one short question, very short question. What we have discussed today, I mean, all the things that we have good, bad, ugly, evil, pretty, beauty, whatever we have discussed today. If you are to advise Delhi right now, was the one thing that you'd say they absolutely must get right when it comes to Bangladesh?
Honestly, this is the first time I would say I have no advice to offer. I think they are mostly on the right track, 99.99% on the right track, except narrative management. But that isn't a Bangladesh specific advice. They have atrocious narrative management and communications across the board, be it domestic politics, be it foreign politics, be it anything. It's terrible. If they get their comms in order, the rest of their policy is, uh, I'm actually quite proud of how insulated from narrative policy is in Delhi and how they've kind of done almost all the right things. Um and especially now they're full of enthusiasm of dealing with Tariq Rahman and the elected government.
Thank you very much, Avijit. It was lovely talking to you, and we truly appreciate your time. And I think we have really dealt upon a number of issues. I mean, the uncomfortable truth, the comfortable realities, and sometimes, I mean, we may not agree on most of the points, but most certainly, at the end of the day, we have to respect our own sovereignty. We have to understand our each other's red flags. With that note, Thank you very much from Dhaka. And we hope you will pay a visit to Dhaka at some point of time.
Thank you very much, Shahbhai. You know, I've always enjoyed talking to you. It is, in fact, I look forward to our disagreements because that forces me to cogitate more. And on the mention of payment, remember, we agreed to 50 kilos of rice and at least 10 kilos of hilsa fish and 1 kilo of Gondharaj Nebu to be sent out here. And I'm
Guaranteed.
going to hold you to it. I don't know how you're going to smuggle the Hilsa fish across the border. Maybe bribe somebody in the BSF as we would and get it over.
Thank you very much. I'll make sure that things are not smuggled but formally sent. Perfect.
That's
See
it.
you.
Perfect, Shahbhai.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye. With that note, we conclude today's session. As you have seen, that we have really spoken at length about a number of issues, how Delhi sees us, how Delhi understands Bangladesh, and Abhijit was very candid in discussing the good side, bad side in every relationship. And I think this also gives us a lot of impetus to see the relationship between Bangladesh and India, and perhaps within the South Asian context in a larger way, rather than seeing it from a very conventional bilateral prism all the time. Thank you very much with that note.